Greetings, Okuna Recaps here. In this video, I'm gonna explain an American fantasy adventure comedy movie called Gulliver's Travels. Spoilers ahead. Proceed with caution and have fun. The movie kicks off by introducing the main character named Lemuel Gulliver, a middle-aged man living in his messy New York apartment. He gets out of bed and goes about his morning routine. He's got a silly side to him, as he plays with his superhero action figures and sings away in the shower while grooving to the beat. Gulliver works as the head of the mailroom department for a newspaper firm in New York. When he arrives his job, he meets a new employee named Dan, and the two head out to get the mail sent off for the day. The duo come across Gulliver's longtime crush, a journalist named Darcy Silverman. Gulliver's been in love with her for a long time, but hasn't got the guts to show his feelings for her. Later that day, Dan shows an office notice to Gulliver and says he's been promoted to the head of the mail department on his first day. Gulliver has been at the firm for a decade now, but no one really pays any attention to him. Dan says Gulliver is too scared to speak up, so he'll never climb any higher than his mailroom gig. Gulliver, looking upset, walks out of his office and notices that Darcy is still working late. He tries to man up and ask her out, but his nerves got the best of him. As a result, he picks up a random file from her desk and tries to walk away. But Darcy stops him and asks if he wants to get a travel writing gig. Trying to impress Darcy, Gulliver nervously accepts and agrees to give her a travel blog the next day. But he's got no experience whatsoever in writing travel blog. So he quickly snatches some articles off the internet and pastes them to his travel blog. The next day at work, he proudly shows his copy-paste travel blog post to Darcy. She's amazed by his blog post, so right away she gave him the next assignment to do. She asks him to take a trip to the Bermuda Triangle and put together an article about the stories of ships vanishing mysteriously in the area. To impress her again, Gulliver accepts the gig. Gulliver immediately flies to Bermuda the next day and meets a man. He shows Gulliver to a boat he had rented for him and shows him how to run it. The boat system is automated and has a GPS. So he thought the journey must be a piece of cake and begins his solo voyage into the Bermuda Triangle. For a while, he had the time of his life, reading how to build a robot magazine while gulping down multiple cans of Coca-Cola. Eventually, he dozed off. When he wakes up, he immediately realizes that he's in the middle of a massive storm. As gigantic waves try to swallow his tiny boat, he quickly wears a life jacket. To make things worse, Gulliver notices the boat is going straight into a massive tornado. Then the boat is sucked on top of the tornado and everything goes black. When Gulliver wakes up, he realizes that he can't move his body. Confused, he looks around to check the situation and shocked to see some tiny men standing on top of his chest. Their leader introduces himself as the Commander Edward Edwardian of the Lilliput Kingdom. Gulliver also spots a crowd of tiny people around him trying to tie him to the ground with small ropes and wooden poles. Suddenly, Commander Edward calls Gulliver a beast. Confused and afraid, Gulliver screams in fear and breaks free from the ropes. So Edward orders his soldiers to pull Gulliver down. The soldiers shoot some sharp hooks towards his underwear and pull him down hard, making him fall on his head and knocking him out cold. When Gulliver wakes up again, he realizes that he's tied down to a big wooden cart from head to toe and he's being dragged into the kingdom of Lilliput. All the civilians come out to get a closer look at this giant so-called beast. The wooden cart stops in front of the royal palace, and Gulliver meets the king of Lilliput, King Theodore. Princess Mary feels sorry for Gulliver and asks Edward if it's really necessary to keep him tied up with ropes. But Edward boldly claims that Gulliver is a spy from Blefuscia, their enemy kingdom. Finally, Gulliver gets a chance to speak and asks the king where he is. Jinx, the king's secretary, tells him that he is in Lilliput, the greatest nation in the world. Gulliver assumes the situation as a prank and yells out for some non-existent cameramen to show themselves. Instead, he's got locked up inside a cave. There he meets another prisoner named Horatio, who was sentenced to life by Edward for trying to express his love for Princess Mary. Their conversation is cut short by Edward, who is eavesdropping them. So Gulliver calls him lame ass. Although he doesn't know the meaning, Edward gets angry and threatens to imprison them for life again. Gulliver tries to sneak out of the bad situation by claiming that lame ass means someone who is very brave. Pleased with the answer, Edward leads the two prisoners to an empty field and forces the duo to plow it. While Gulliver is struggling hard to plow the field, the bells from the palace ring twice, as a signal that Blefuscia Kingdom had come to invade Lilliput. Enemy soldiers are already inside the palace. They're trying to kidnap Princess Mary and had already started a fire. Edward rushes to the palace and orders everyone not to save the princess, as he should be the one to save her. Meanwhile, Horatio asks Gulliver to help the princess because Edward can't save her by himself. As expected, Giant Gulliver takes down the tiny enemies rather easily and saves the princess from harm. But the king and his secretary are still stuck in the fire, so Gulliver quickly removes his shorts and pees onto the building. Luckily, the raging fire stops and the king and his secretary are saved. As a result, the king pardons him and Horatio from their imprisonment and celebrates the special occasion with a feast. Everyone was thanking and praising for Gulliver's bravery, although only Edward is seemingly furious. The king wants to know where did Gulliver come from. He answers he is from Manhattan. Having no knowledge of the outside world, the citizens of Lilliput assumes Gulliver is a hero in Manhattan. For Gulliver, he finally gets to experience the feeling of being a hero. So he immediately makes up a story and claims he is known as President the Awesome in Manhattan. Other than Edward, everyone believes him. During his stay, skilled engineers of Lilliput build a massive mansion and movie theater for Gulliver. He shows them the sinking of Titanic and claims it is the tragic story of his life. Meanwhile, Horatio asks Gulliver to help him get the love of Princess Mary. Gulliver agrees, and the two set off to the palace. Gulliver hides behind a building and recites the lyrics from Taylor Graves' Kiss to Horatio. Horatio approaches the princess and repeats the song as if the song is his own love letter. The plan works. The princess likes the lyrics and starts to fall for Horatio. But then, she is summoned by Edward. He says he and the princess are destined to get married because he is the bravest man in the kingdom. But apparently, the princess isn't fond of Edward. Somewhere on the beach, Lilliput soldiers found massive washed-up boat. Gulliver rushes to the scene and finds his phone still working. He has 12 voice messages from Darcy, who is really upset to find out about Gulliver's copy-and-paste article. She informs him that she too is now sailing to the Bermuda Triangle to research herself. Upset, Gulliver has no desire to return to New York. So he decides to remain in Lilliput forever and leaves everything behind. Edward is not happy about Gulliver's decision, so he confronts the king that Gulliver is a fraud. But the king firmly says that he trusts Gulliver and dismisses Edward. To make things worse for Edward, the king appoints Gulliver as the new general and demotes Edward to vice-general. Jealous and furious, Edward turns off the defense system of Lilliput Kingdom. Already waiting in their battleships, Blefuscians seize the opportunity immediately and attack Lilliput with rains of cannonballs. As the newly appointed general, Gulliver has to step up and stop the assault. At first, he's afraid to go near the enemy ships. But he realizes that the cannonballs are not making any major injuries for him. So he destroys the enemy battleships, defeats the Blefuscians, and becomes the savior of Lilliput again. For that, skilled engineers of Lilliput build a model of Times Square, so Gulliver could feel at home. They even change their clothing style to match Gulliver's style. Gulliver is having the time of his life in Lilliput. One night, Edward barges into the princess' chamber and forces the princess to marry him. The princess finally tells him she doesn't love him and orders him to leave her alone. An angered Edward betrays Lilliput Kingdom and seeks help from Blefuscian King. Edward shows Blefuscian King Build Your Robot magazine he snatched from Gulliver's boat. The Blefuscian King agrees to help and together they build Gulliver-sized giant robot. While Gulliver is at the Times Square model, chatting with the citizens, the bells from the palace ring again. So Gulliver gets ready for battle but is surprised to see a huge robot about his size, being controlled by Edward, stands tall right in front of him. Edward challenges him for a duel. Gulliver has no choice but to fight. He tries to push the robot to the ground with all his might, but the robot doesn't budge. Edward gives him the wedgies he deserves to force his defeat in front of the people of Lilliput. Edward also makes him confess how he's a fraud and everything he boasts about is a lie. The people of Lilliput are surprised to learn the truths about Gulliver and his shameless lies. Edward then banishes Gulliver to a forbidden island called the Island Where We Dare Not Go. As soon as Gulliver arrives on said island, he is captured within a jar by a giant little girl. Apparently, the island is home to giants bigger than Gulliver. The giant little girl assumes Gulliver is a toy and locks him in her Barbie doll house. Meanwhile, Darcy also arrives Lilliput. Gulliver had lied everyone in Lilliput that Darcy is his princess back home, so Edward imprisons her immediately. Horatio sees the dire situation and decides to travel to the island where we dare not go. He manages to reach the giant little girl's dollhouse safely and informs Gulliver about Darcy. Suddenly, Gulliver notices a skeleton of a dead U.S. Air Force pilot and uses his parachute to fly back to Lilliput. First, he meets with Darcy in the prison and confesses his love for her. Then, he apologizes to the king and the queen that he doesn't want to lie anymore, but genuinely wants to help Lilliput and its people. They all forgive him for his unintentional mistakes. After that, Gulliver challenges Edward for a duel. The following day, Gulliver and Edward stand before each other ready to battle. As a condition, Gulliver wants Edward to give the throne back to King Theodore if he wins, but if he loses, Edward can do anything he wants. They fight, and immediately, Edward's robot overpowers him within seconds. While Gulliver is beaten to a pulp, Horatio manages to get inside Edward's robot and successfully deactivate it from within. After that, Gulliver easily manages to defeat the robot and Edward. The crowd happily cheers for Gulliver's victory. Even Darcy joins in for the celebration. After the battle, Horatio bravely confesses his love for the princess in front of everyone, and the two finally kiss. But just then, Edward, who now has reached the point of insanity, tries to take the princess as a hostage. The princess finally had enough of Edward and punches him in the face. Then Darcy and Gulliver share their first kiss passionately. Meanwhile, the two kings are about to start a war again. But Gulliver successfully talks some sense to the two kings and helps to make peace between the two rival kingdoms. Then everybody happily sing and dance to Edwin Starr's War. Finally, Gulliver's boat is repaired, and along with Darcy, the two lovebirds make their return towards New York City. A few weeks later, Gulliver has already left his menial mailroom gig and become a travel writer now. He has also completed another travel assignment. The movie ends as the two leaves Darcy's office while holding each other's hands. Subscribe and turn on the notification for more videos like this. Smash a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching and catch you in the next one.